You ever just randomly been playing a game and then all of a sudden one day you just found a game that looked incredibly similar, so you decided you were going to give it a shot just because? Well, that's how I came across this game, because one day I was just doing a randomizer run of Metroid Prime and then I figured to myself, you know, there really aren't a lot of 3D Metroidvanias out there aside from the actual Metroid games, and then the next day, or something like that, I found this game on my discovery queue on Steam, so that kind of just worked out pretty well. So of course I did the natural thing, which is to procrastinate, so I just put the game on my wishlist and then I waited for like a year before I actually got around to playing it, but I did so recently and I figured I might as well make a video out of it, because Lord knows I have to do something with this channel. So this game is called Delta Manifold, and as you might have guessed from what I said before, it's actually a 3D Metroidvania, so I was interested in seeing if it turned out as well as I would have liked, and spoiler alert, it didn't exactly do so. Okay, so the game isn't that bad, but it does kind of feel like it's unfinished, like it really needed some more time in development because it's not refined whatsoever and it's lacking a lot of polish as well. It's also pretty short and it's pretty bare bones as well. I think an easy example of that is the story. Basically, as far as I can tell, you're stuck into some weird alternate dimension, kind of, and for some reason you need to get out of here and seal the dimension back up, but that's really about as far as the story goes. Okay, there's a little bit more to into that, like how said dimension is sort of causing distortions in reality or something along those lines, but it's mostly just background lore and the rest of the story isn't really conveyed much. You just get to see the aftermath without really seeing how it happened or anything. You have this sort of Metroid Prime-like scan visor, which you can use to scan stuff around in the environment or your enemies and stuff, but 95% of the time it's just pointless flavor text, which barely gives you an ounce of story or never actually gives you any combat strategies or anything. It just gives you a brief description of the enemy and that's about all it's good for. And that's not even mentioning just how inconsistent this whole scan visor is. Like, I managed to get the achievement for scanning everything in the game in like less than an hour. I wasn't even at the halfway point of the game yet, and past the halfway point everything becomes unscannable for some reason. Like, you'll just come across a new enemy and you can't even scan them for anything. They just exist and you can't scan the layout, you can't scan the consumables or anything. It basically becomes almost completely pointless if it wasn't for a few puzzles that revolve around it here and there. Occasionally you'll come across a locked door that you need to activate a switch in order to open, and when that's the case you can use the scan visor to see a line that'll lead you to where the switch is, assuming you're on the right side of the door, that is. And every once in a while the scan visor will also allow you to see things that are otherwise invisible, and yeah, that's about all it's good for. If you can scan something, you'll see a red circle displayed around them, and once you finish scanning them, you'll be able to see a blue circle instead, unless it's the Sparks consumable, because you can't actually scan them for some reason, even though there's a circle around them, but that does mean you have a tool to find them more easily, because you can just turn the visor on and you'll see a red circle off in the distance, you know it's that, so that's cool. And also, when you kill an enemy, you can just scan their corpse, but not their actual corpse, I mean the spot where they died, because their corpse is rolling around all over the place, but the spot where they died is still fine, apparently. Speaking of enemies, there really aren't that many in there, and most of them just attack you from up close or they shoot projectiles, and when they do attack you from up close, they kind of just run up to you and bash their heads against you. They don't have an animation for attacking or anything, they just get close, they make a sound effect, and you take damage. So yeah, that's cool. So you fight these enemies with your very own guns, and there's 5 of them in total. 4 are mandatory and 1 is optional. The first one is the Corpse Rifle, which apparently uses blood as ammo, which is kind of weird, but it kind of just shoots bullets, so it's pretty standard. Then you also have the Distortion Shotgun, which is the shotgun, but it's purple, so it's grape flavored, I guess. There's also the Necrotic Rail Shot, which is basically a railgun, so it's a sniper rifle, but it shoots electricity, kind of. And there's also the Chaos Launcher, which is a green rocket launcher, and it does splash damage, and you can also use it to rocket jump and get out of bounds. So it's pretty fun to use, but it will kill you pretty quickly if you aren't careful. And finally, if you manage to collect 666 sparks, you can pick up the Void Cannon, which has its own sort of energy meter that decides when you can fire it, and it just shoots this giant big ball, which shoots smaller projectiles that home in on whatever is around. So it feels like it should be pretty good, but somehow its damage doesn't feel as good as you'd think it would be, but sometimes it feels as good as it should be, so I don't know, the damage was really weird with this one for some reason. Personally, my favorite was the rail shot because it had a long range, it was accurate, and it also dealt a lot of damage, and its fire rate was pretty much on par with all the other weapons, so that wasn't really a disadvantage either. It was just practical, what can I say? And I did have a little bit of fun messing around with the Chaos Launcher, rocket jumping all over the place, but I didn't experiment with that too much. But hey, if you're able to break the game, you can actually go ahead and get it super early and use it to reach the final boss in like 3 minutes. So that's cool. Watch a speedrun if that interests you. So firing your gun actually requires energy, which is that purple pink-ish bar in the bottom right corner of the screen, and when you run out of energy, well, you can fire your gun until it fills back up. So it's also used for dashing around, which you do by pressing the shift key, which allows you to move around faster and dodge stuff. So it's pretty useful. The dash is also kind of janky because it can be used to pretty much scale up walls. So if you find a surface that's like just a little less than 90 degrees straight, you can pretty much just dash on it and you'll get yeeted into the air. You can use this to sequence break and get into certain places you aren't supposed to get to normally, like this hole in the wall. You can just dash on this rock over here and eventually you'll make it up, and I'm pretty sure this is not how you were supposed to do it because it's janky as hell. And then sometimes every once in a while you'll just be dashing around minding your own business and suddenly you'll hit a funny collision and you'll just get launched into the sky like a space shuttle. You gotta admit, it does feel pretty nice to dash around and shoot at the enemies at the same time, but because the enemy variety is kind of lacking and they're all fairly simple, it's not as good as it could have been. There's also only 2 bosses in the game. The first one is this Delta Descendant guy, and well, he's pretty easy. He just shoots a whole bunch of circles, bubbles, maybe, all over the place, and you can hide behind the hills to avoid getting hit, and every once in a while you just shoot a long stream of straightforward bullets, so you just move around and hide behind cover and you're good. And the second and final boss is the Herald, and he kind of just stands there and shoots these balls that shoot other balls at you, and I'm not sure exactly how you're supposed to avoid them, but it doesn't matter because you can just melt him in a matter of seconds and you'll probably die before you do. One problem with the combat, however, is that it's a little hard to tell sometimes when you're actually doing damage to the enemies or not, because they don't flash or anything. They kind of just take the bullets, and eventually after a while they'll fall to the ground and start tumbling around like this because they died. I also noticed some janky hitbox problems, especially with the rail shot. Like, look at this footage right here and tell me, how did any of these shots actually miss? Scattered around the world are these sparks, which you can pick up in order to increase the counter down there in the bottom right corner of the screen, and you can use those to activate certain switches that will open certain doors, but there aren't that many in the game, so most of the sparks will probably just go towards funding your impulsive purchase of that void cannon. On the right of your screen is this bar, which will occasionally rise, and if you get close enough to a spark, you'll see a message in the top left corner letting you know that there's a spark nearby. There's also a radar, and at the bottom left corner is your shield and your health. And gonna be honest, I have no idea what the shield does, because even when I had some shield and I got hit, I still lost some health. So whatever it does, I couldn't figure it out. On the right side of the screen at the bottom is your energy as well as the amount of sparks you currently have, and in the top right corner there'll be a message that will pop up to notify you when there is a teleporter nearby. So you'll start the game out in this tutorial area where you'll be taught everything you need in order to play the game, so how to move around, look around, jump, crouch, and also dash. You'll also be told how to use your flashlight, which you can activate by pressing F, which will illuminate what's in front of you, but sometimes it's a little hard to figure out whether it's actually turned on or not, because occasionally you'll just be face up against the wall and you'll press F to try to open the flashlight, but you won't see it change until you back off of the wall, so sometimes it's a little hard to tell. Anyway, after a quick trip over there, you'll be finished in no time and you'll be able to head into the actual world, starting with the Highlands. There are a couple of places in this game, including the Mountain Crossroads, which has this music with these weird sounds in it that'll freak you out occasionally, and also the Veiled Ruins, which also has weird sounds in its music, but it also features cramped corridors, so that's always fun. You also have the Occult Research Facility, which is filled with these weird things, whatever they are, and they're also filled with assassins and guys with guns trying to kill you. You've got the forest filled with these giant gray monsters that shoot these sort of wind blade things at you. It's a little weird. There's also the Distortion, which is essentially a giant fortress that you infiltrate from the top down, and it's also filled with grape-flavored Mountain Dew, as well as the Lower Distortion, which is basically just a transition area between the Distortion and another part of the map. The Necropolis and the Ancient Burial Ground are just two undead-themed areas with creepy music, but there's not much to see in them, they're pretty short. Deep inside the forest, there's also this building, which isn't really its own area, it's technically just a part of the forest, but it does feel radically different, so I'm mentioning it here anyway. And finally, you have the Delta Manifold, which is the alternate dimension, and it can only be reached through portals, but really it's just this sort of big hub area with portals that connect to other parts of the main world, and you have to find a portal in order to get here and then pick a portal in here to get back to the real world. My personal favorite area was the Distortion because I really liked the way it was set up, as in you go inside by essentially breaking and entering in a giant fortress, and then you have to mess around in the ramparts up top in order to find switches that will unlock doors. And then you have to drop down straight into the fortress right from the top in order to find more switches to open some more doors that'll lead you to the area's final objective. I thought it was a really cool setup and design idea for an area in a Metroidvania, and I also think this area is just really pretty overall. I really like the purple pink-ish aesthetic, and it had this sort of grandiose feel to it, which I really like. I also really like the Veiled Ruins, even if they're more so a connective area between other areas, but I really like the atmosphere around here, what with the creepy sounds in the music, being stuck in a cave and forced to walk through narrow and cramped hallways while being followed by these weird black stalker creatures. I thought it made it kind of creepy and unnerving in a way. Despite the rather simple graphics, I actually really enjoyed the atmosphere in this game, with every area having its own unique identity and a soundtrack to help reinforce that. Most of the areas were quite unique from one another, and I think they did a good job at looking and feeling unnerving, creepy, or sometimes grand and beautiful as well. Gameplay wise, they didn't all hit the mark though. I think my least favorite one was the Necropolis, because it was kind of like the Distortion, where you have to go around and find switches in order to open doors, but unlike the Distortion, which basically takes place in one great big open area with many switches to find, the Necropolis only had 2 switches to find and basically 2 rooms to look around in. One of those 2 rooms is basically empty with nothing to do in it besides, you know, press the switch and move on, but the other one is this platforming challenge, which was a lot harder than it seemed because it was actually very easy to overshoot or undershoot your jump, and with the platform's edges being super slippery, it was basically guaranteed that you would fall down when that happened. And when you fall down, you had to take this rising platform in order to get back to the platforming challenge, but even that was kind of a pain because if you weren't centered well enough, you would just bonk your head on the platforms above and then you'd fall back down. So your goal is to go around the map and pick up the 4 artifacts in order to seal the Delta Manifold back up to prevent it from leaking back into the real world, I think. Something like that, yeah. So you have to pick up the Chaos, Necrotic, Distortion, and Occult artifacts, the last one of which I did not show myself picking up. Whoops. So being a Metroidvania, while you're exploring, you'll come across certain upgrades that'll allow you to explore more of the world. Those upgrades being the 4 guns you'll pick up along the way, which will allow you to open their color corresponding doors. Otherwise, when it comes to movement upgrades, the only one I could find was a double jump, which I only use for optional pickups and stuff. I also found 4 types of miscellaneous upgrades, which are shield sparks, life sparks, and energy sparks, which increase your shield health and energy by 25, as well as a dash upgrade, which reduced the dash energy cost from 25 to 15. Like most Metroidvanias, you also have access to a map, which, not gonna lie, is kind of disappointing because it just looks like a bunch of random blue shapes. Every once in a while you'll be able to see this little gray sphere in the middle of the map, which is actually your current position, but you won't always be able to see it because sometimes the map will interfere with it. And you can't also really rotate the map. You can rotate left and right, but not really up and down, so that's a little underwhelming. Every once in a while you'll come across a little hiccup, like this portal over here, which kind of struggles to let you enter, and also this piece of missing geometry over here. And other times you'll open a door or turn around the corner and you'll suddenly find yourself staring out in the abyss. It's a little jarring. So yeah, that was my experience with Delta Manifold, and as you might have guessed, even though it was pretty flawed, I did enjoy my time with it overall because, well, I'm a sucker for Metroidvanias for one, and 2, I really enjoyed the world layout and the atmosphere it conveyed regardless. I enjoyed the combat too, even if it was really simple, because there wasn't a whole lot of enemy variety or bosses, and The weapons were pretty straightforward, but they were still fun to use, I felt. Dashing around to dodge enemy attacks or using it to destroy physics and fly all over the place was also rather enjoyable. Unfortunately, its rather simplistic nature and short length means it's kind of lacking when it comes to replayability. Despite all its flaws, I did enjoy playing this game regardless. I think it was a rather unique and charming little adventure, even if it wasn't the most grandiose experience I've ever had, but still, if you're a Metroidvania fan and what you saw in this video interests you, you should probably give it a try. I think you'll enjoy it even if you be able to realize it's not the best out there. If you're not a Metroidvania fan or you're looking for something with a little bit more polish and lasting substance, then yeah, you probably won't find it here, unfortunately. Absolutely no transition outro. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, well, that's cool. If not, well, sorry, I tried my best. But hey, if you did, you can always check out this channel, I guess, for some more dumb and bad videos, or maybe just come back every once in a while in the hopes I'll have something posted by then, which God only knows when that's going to happen, but I'll try to make it happen eventually. So yeah, thanks for watching once again, and see you later.